welcome back to the Resilient Responder podcast. Today I have an international guest, our first international guest, my friend Arjuna George from British Columbia, Canada. Retired fire chief, 24 years, Arjuna, is that correct?
That is correct, yeah, 24 years, almost 25.
Nice. We're going to have a great conversation today, me and AJ. We're going to talk about everything from resiliency down to coaching. AJ actually runs his own Silver Arrow Coaching and Consulting up there in Canada. And I got to ask you, because you're my first Canadian guest, I got to ask, you guys really wear denim jackets still? Do you do?
Well, only since Yellowstone came out.
Of course, right? Waiting for a TV show to come out. Here comes the denim tuxedos, right?
Yeah, that's right. No, there's a few denim, yeah, for sure. Stanfields, yeah, a lot of Stanfields.
Man, you got to have the joke about it. I do this with everybody,
for sure.
It's part of the job. But I'm gonna let AJ kind of roll with it and give a little background on what he's done and what his career was and what he's doing now.
For me, yeah, 24 years in the fire service. Beautiful Salt Spring Island on the west coast of Canada, kind of the tropical banana belt of Canada, they say.
Nice.
24 years in one department, which is pretty unique. So I got to be, essentially my dream job in my hometown, which is kind of a unique situation to be in. I moved up through the ranks, started as a volunteer back in 1997. And after 4 short years, I landed the first career firefighter job there and moved up through the ranks to firefighter, to captain, training officer, assistant chief, deputy chief, and then fire chief for the last 5 years. And then I retired in last November in 2021. My career was definitely cut short. My goal was not to retire after only 24 years. I was hoping to go a little longer. And that all stemmed from burnout, occupational, organizational burnout. And that kind of what brings me here today, what sparked my new career, which is Silver Arrow Coaching Consulting, helping fire chiefs across Canada manage stress, become more resilient. That is my goal, because I definitely felt as myself being in the fire chief role, very isolating role it can be, very tough decisions you got to make, and if you're doing that by yourself, that can be pretty overloading. So for me, I found a gap there, and my next encore career will be hopefully to fill that gap across Canada. And then also I joined FRC as one of the coaches through the United States.
And that's the biggest thing these days is getting, sharing that knowledge. And I think, building on what you said about helping other fire chiefs, it really is a very, it's lonely at the top, right?
Definitely.
You're expected to do certain things. You're expected to operate at a certain level. And it's something that a lot of us who never got out of, or at least that high in the ranks, don't really understand. And, one of the things, much like you, for those who don't know a lot about my story, I ended up leaving the fire service after 21 years myself. And I got on 96, so I was on, back in the day and, in the Northeast here in the States. And there was always this tough guy mentality with it, especially as a first responder, but as a male especially. And I would imagine this is the same up in your neck of the woods too. And you go from, not only you start as a private, you start as a firefighter, on the front line, and you have this mentality, but then you aspire to the 5 bugle position, and you're now the leader of leaders on your department in your region. And so not only is this, tough guy suck it up mentality prevalent, but now you have everyone, quote unquote, underneath you that is going through stuff. So, and I don't know this perspective. This is great. You're my first 5 bugle guest, so I'm gonna grill you a little bit on this. So,
sounds good.
As a fire chief, knowing from your standpoint, your career ending because of burnout, how hard was it to be able to attend to the mental and physical needs of your members, like knowing that you were edged on burnout themselves? What did that look like for you?
Well, I guess for myself, I kind of prided myself that I was an ambassador for mental health in my organization, that I promoted that But looking back on it now, I obviously was promoting it exterior, but I really wasn't
Mm,
fully embracing it myself. I was spending more time worrying and taking care of the firefighters, which is critical, of course.
yep.
But I obviously was lacking a little self care myself, right?
Hmm.
So, and that just kind of went under the radar for many, many years. I just kind of ignored the signs that I was feeling personally. Um, so, yeah, I think for myself, I was a promoter of it. I sent people to workshops, courses, became peer leaders, mental health specialists, and then yeah, myself, I
Hmm.
just wasn't recognizing those red flags in my own body.
Help others and you help yourself, right?
Yes. So
Yeah.
my message now is kind of like that's number one: be your own first you responder, and take care of your number one, especially as a leader, because there's no way you're going to be able to effectively lead your organization if you're not, mentally well as yourself, right? So I think we spend so much emphasis on the firefighting skills and being strong and fit when our brains and our nervous systems are ill and sick.
Right. Right. And
I
and
think we
that's one
need
of
to
the things
balance
that
that out.
we do. We need to balance it.
Mhm.
And the thing is, being mentally well, being okay in processing what we see on the job does not take away from what the job is.
Mm.
The job's always going to be stressful. The job's always going to require you to be a unique kind of person to be able to do it. And I think that's a misnomer with a lot of people is that, acknowledging the PTSD, acknowledging the burnout, acknowledging the stressors of the job. They think that somehow that's going to, if you acknowledge it and you work on it, somehow that's going to take away the toughness that goes with it. And it's not. If anything, it's going to make you a stronger person. I know, for me, and I'm gonna bounce this question off of you. I know for me, when I started healing, when I started dealing with my stuff, starting in 2015 and working through what ended up being the pandemic, that I am a stronger person I was um, when I was on the job. So now knowing
Mm.
this, people like us, we can go back and we can kind of utilize, what we've learned. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. Um, so what does that look like with what you're doing now with Silver Arrow? What
Mm.
exactly do you do with that new part of your life?
Yeah, well, I just kind of expand on what you just said there. For me, I think if I went back to be a fire chief today, I'd be a totally different person.
Right.
I've learned so much in the last 2 years
Hmm.
to make myself a stronger human being for sure. So, but saying that, Silver Arrow is my new passion project, and I don't see myself going back operationally anytime soon. I think my niche and my ability to support fire chiefs in another way is healthy for me as well as it's supporting the community of the fire service and other first responder agencies. So Silver Hours is essentially a coaching environment for chief officers, so acting chiefs, any officers up to the fire chief level. And essentially, I've niched down to that level just to support that one unique group
Mm,
that I feel has some voids, some silos they get to work in.
mm.
And the coach, so I became a certified coach last year, and I really feel that coaching is an environment that allows people to really open up, find out who they truly are as a person, and not live the lie. And they, really seek what sets their soul on fire and live the best life, right? So that's my goal moving forward. Consulting is a part of it, but coaching is really where I want to support the fire service.
I think that's incredible. And part of this, which is great with this particular episode, is being able to talk about this coaching part of everything is how invaluable, priceless coaching really can be, because it literally is conversation. And I was one of those guys for years thinking that a lot of things were hocus pocus, and like yoga and Reiki and meditation and coaching and all this other stuff. It was all like, no, 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 no. The only thing, and even up until the point where I would accept therapy, um, none of this stuff's going to work because it's so holistic. It's not invasive, and truly coaching, just because of what it is simply a conversation. and it's being held accountable when you're setting goals and trying to get new perspectives. It's such an amazing leadership building tool, honestly, that can be utilized on so many different levels in emergency services. And I'm sure you agree, and which is probably why a lot of why you do it now. um I wish 25 years ago or so, they were utilizing this in the fire service down here in the US, because um just because they were in leadership roles didn't necessarily mean they were good leaders, right?
100%. Yeah. And for me, coaching is what got me to coaching. Being coached by other amazing professionals that I know is what got me into coaching. And it's actually what wrote my book. Like, I honestly was sitting on the fence of writing a book, and one day I'll do that.
Yep.
And my coach challenged me and said, "Why wait? Let's do it." So
That's it. Yep.
I owe it to my coach to be where I am today, and to be able to share that. So that's pretty amazing.
So one of the things I always like to ask people, when especially the first responders who come on the show, is to kind of bring it back to the job for a second. What was and it's always funny to hear what people's response. What was your favorite part of the job?
Mm.
It's always a tough question. It's always like, what
Hmm.
was it? The fires? Was it was it?
My first thing that comes to mind would be the people that I'm
Nice.
working with. There's no doubt in my mind that I love those people. They'll always be part of my life. Um, and then I guess it would be the high adrenaline fires, right? Those big rescue calls, those big fires. But really, the first thing would be the people of the organization. That's what really built the fire service. Trucks don't put out fires,
People do.
so yeah,
It's funny. I
exactly.
actually just I just watched Top Gun Maverick last night, and one of the lines is, "It's not the plane, it's the pilot."
Oh,
And
there you go.
that's completely transferable to what you're just saying. It's
Mhm.
not the fire pump, it's the person running. It's not the hose line, it's the person on the end of it. And that can be transferred to any kind of call we do, as first responders, firefighters specifically. It really takes a good heart and a dedicated person to do this job. And I think that's what makes a lot of what we go through as first responders so hard, honestly. And this kind of leads us in this next little part. For me, when I started getting, as you call it, burnout, what ended up being for me PTSD. Um, One of the biggest struggles I had was questioning why I did this selfless job for so long. I got in very young. Why am I going through this? Did you ever find at any point before you started maybe seeing the light at the end of the tunnel? Did you ever question why you were going through this? Why you had to go through what maybe this job was doing to you?
For sure, I think I definitely felt that, but I would say, looking back on it now, it was a pretty short duration. I'm a pretty optimistic, positive person, and
Mm,
I kind of found the silver lining in all of my burnout, my symptoms, how my body was feeling. I really felt that as a short term thing, and really changed my mindset, my gears, and said, I don't regret burning out. I don't regret going
mm,
through all that. I actually see it as a gift, because now I got out of it. I'm recovering. I'm still recovering,
yep.
but I feel like I'm definitely on the projection to go to the next level. And it's kind of, the name of my book is Burnt Around the Edges. And that's how I felt, was burnt around the edges, but not fully cooked through. Like, I
Mm,
wasn't fully burnt out where I was never able to do anything again in my life. I have a fire burning inside of me right now to do more.
mm,
Um,
I could tell.
yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So it was a pretty short turnaround, really. I really felt that I can't just dwell in this. I have to process it. And there was a time of, sadness and depression and anxiety and all those things, where I would just sit on my deck and stare out into the
Mm,
ocean and just kind of be a vegetable for a day.
right.
But that's what my body needed. That's what my mind needed, and I have no shame in that. Um, but it turned fairly fast, where I was able to, all right, let's use what I've learned, and let's make the world a better place.
Yeah, and that's important. And I think, and that I'm glad you went that way with it. I'm the same way. I mean, I definitely spent some time in the suck, as I like to call it.
Mhm.
But I have no regrets. And one of the phrases I don't like to hear a lot is everything happens for a reason. One of the ones I turn some words around, I use a different phrase, and it's called we're all here at the time we need to be. We're all where we need to be at a certain time, right? And I wouldn't be where I'm at. You wouldn't be where you're at if everything that had happened to us, with us, whatever hadn't taken place. And these days, yes, I'm the same way. I'm actually very grateful I've gone through what I have gone through, especially with the job. And it has made me able to do what I do, and in a lot of ways is similar to what you're doing. And part of that brings us to resiliency, which is obviously just the name of the podcast, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things I always try to stress is that a lot of people like us, and other, for me in particular, other speakers who talk about this around the country, um, we're trying to get resiliency to stop being an after effect. It needs to stop being something we aim for and something we build from the beginning. Because then, if you have it already, there's less of this chance of maybe an early burnout, right? So, what to you, in your words, what does resiliency mean to you?
I think resiliency, I truly believe there is that classic where you're bouncing back, but I don't think bouncing back is healthy. I think
Mm.
really what it should be is every time there's a challenge, turbulent times in your life, you should be experiencing it, embracing that feeling, but you should be growing from it. If you keep yo-yo back and forth, so being resilient and bouncing back, like the classic term, really you're not growing, you're not getting better. You're just going to experience that same challenge somewhere down the line once again. So really, it's bouncing back, coming back from challenges, difficult times, but growing each time. I think is the key, and not the yo-yo effect. So.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with that, and that comes with being proactive, and I think that's where the coaching part really comes into play. Because if we're having these conversations and being asked these powerful questions from the get go, whether that's recruit school, whether that's first time on the job, whatever it may be, if we're having these conversations and getting people to be aware, that's when you're going to get that early resiliency. And it's not just going to be because there's resiliency, right? And then there's coping skills. And I think coping skills are great. Coping skills can get you through the hardest of times. But unfortunately, in my mind, this is just how I feel through my experience. Coping skills are very temporary. They're acute, and they are literally there to get you through a moment. In my mind, resiliency is a long-term thing. Resiliency is what's going to get us and bring us to a full life. And um, you know, I know a lot of first responders. Um, most of us have coping skills. I think from day one we have coping skills. Most of them are pretty unhealthy. Whether that's booze, drugs, women, gambling, whatever it may be. I mean, most of the coping skills which get us by, air quotes there, folks, are just doing that. They're getting us by. They're not helping us grow. They're not letting us heal. And I think that adds to the stigma. Now, I know for we're not Canada and the US aren't really separate. It's not like, the US and Australia or anything like that. We're not separated by a lot. We share a lot of the same things, especially when it comes to the fire service. When it comes to the stigma, what does that look like for you guys up in Canada?
Well, I truly think the stigma is dissolving. It's slowly dissolving, but it has been kind of a work in progress for the last 10 years. There's some real amazing ambassadors through the fire service, especially in BC and across the country, but BC in particular, because that's where I know most of the fellows.
Mm.
But the ambassadors that are leading this, they are breaking some heavy ground, and allowing people to be totally vulnerable and open, talking about this kind of stuff. And they're making it the norm. They're making it not. And I'm hopefully I'm part of that team as well. But I know there's some people that are just they're really clearing the way for this to be the norm across Canada. So I think for us in Salt Spring Fires particularly, it's been a topic on our minds, a regular topic that we discuss almost on a daily basis about
Mm.
mental health. Still a long way to go. Still a
Oh
long
yeah.
way to go. And that's what one thing that I found was burnout was often not talked about. It was usually the PTSD, the traumatic injuries, that were discussed at conferences, workshops. But when it came to organizational burnout, it was kind of just moved off. And I
Right.
know there's a lot of people that deal with traumatic stress, but there's also a lot of people that deal with organizational, political stress that ends a lot of careers as well. So,
Right. Right. And we're actually going to talk about some of that in just a few. We're going to take a quick break, folks, with a word from our sponsor, First Responder Coaching, and we'll be right back.
Coaching is here now for all first responders and their families. When it comes to the job and the stresses that come with it, we at First Responder Coaching know exactly how it can affect every aspect of your life and the lives of those around you. That's because we are first responders and their families. First responders are well versed in reacting to a situation. It is literally what we do as firefighters, law enforcement, dispatch, and EMS personnel. When trauma enters our lives, we react to it by tucking it down away somewhere in our minds. But we carry it with us and it never really goes away. We need to stop carrying trauma into every aspect of our personal and professional lives. It's time to start having proactive, powerful conversations right now to gain a better balance in the responder's whole life. This is true for their families, especially the spouses. Take that first step in making some of the most important improvements in your life. Visit www.1strespondercoaching.org now to make an appointment to chat with FRC. A coach will reach out, and before you know it, you'll be on your way to living a proactively fit lifestyle.
So here I am with Arjuna George from Canada, and we're talking about resiliency in the first responder lifestyle, mental wellness. And we're talking right now about being proactive and specifically the stigma. And I think it's always good to hear, and I'll agree with you. Having been around for a while, I could definitely see that the stigma is slowly starting to dissolve. And I think it is. I think it's because we're having those conversations. We're making this more of a normal conversation where, years past, we wouldn't talk about cancer, right? And how many of our brothers and sisters have dropped because of cancer? And, this has led to, having, we'll call them washing machines. They're not washing machines, they're extractors, but having your gear cleaned now and not being the cool guy with the melted helmet and not using your flash hood as a scarf in the winter and changing out your gloves every so often and all this stuff, having pre-screens and all this. We talk about this. It's a normal thing. And that's where we're starting to get with mental wellness and mental health, whether it's burnout. And you're right. I don't think burnout gets to play that it deserves as much as PTSD currently is. And there is a difference, right? I think burnout, a lot of people just assume it's synonymous with PTSD, and it isn't. PTSD is a
mhm.
diagnosis. You can have burnout without having PTSD.
Yes.
Um, and I think with that, and this is always one of my favorite terms to talk about, is compassion fatigue.
Mhm.
And I think that really goes hand in hand with burnout. Did you, when you were kind of going through your movements here with burnout and stuff, did you feel that you just couldn't deal? You had no more compassion in you. Did you have that experience?
For sure. Not to the degree, I don't think that was the final straw for me. But compassion fatigue was definitely a part of my struggle for sure, where I was just feeling I just had less capacity to deal with everything in life. For me, I think there's a term that I just kind of came across in my research of burnout is moral injury.
Mm,
I really feel like I was dealing with moral injury. Um, as a fire chief, I was dealing with stuff that just didn't sit with my values and what I stood for. And I also just didn't have the capacity to either fight it or to even have the ability and the authority to change any of those. So witnessing that day after day, it just kind of beat me down, beat me down, beat me down. And I think that was kind of my final straw.
a lot of people, and there's some names out there in this world of PTSD and mental wellness. People who are breaking down the stigma, people like Michael Seguru, and others. And one of the things, the reason I bring up Michael Seguru is administrative betrayal is something people don't give a lot of weight to. Some people think that you end up your final straw ends up being a bad call, right? And a lot of times it can be the bad call, but the actual catalyst is the administrative betrayal, if you will, that is unseen, the lack of support, the throwing you under the bus, the in some cases the suck it up buttercup. At any point in your career, did you experience any of this? You don't have to name
100%.
yeah, it's everywhere, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a month of it or a day of it. It was a decade of it easily. So like a slow burn, it just kind of fizzled away in the background and went unnoticed for a long time, right? So,
Yeah.
and then finally, when it got to the point of basically a flashover, my burnout was all right.
Here
So,
we are.
and yeah, it was, and my day that I decided, it was the 23rd of June in 2020. I hadn't talked to myself about this, I hadn't considered it, hadn't talked to my wife, hadn't talked to my kids, anybody. I went outside on my lawn and called my CEO that day and said, effective today, I'm taking a leave. I just can't do this anymore.
Mm.
And when I hung up, I was like, where did that come from? I did
Right.
not plan that. My body, something greater than me said, hey, you need to do this today or you might not wake up tomorrow. And that was a pretty powerful moment. And it's still so ingrained in me that it's like, wow, um, something was telling me to do that. And it wasn't me. Wasn't my logical mind anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It was probably always there. And it was in that moment.
Yep.
And I think a lot of us who go through burnout and compassion fatigue and moral injuries, I like that term, and PTSD, we have that moment, right? That about face. And I think some can bounce back better than others. I think for a lot of us, it ends up being that like, okay, this is it. This is the end of my career. I can't do frontline anymore. I can't, whatever it is, whatever it's administrative betrayal, whether it's the calls, whether it's a combination of personal, professional stuff, you have that about face. And you look back on your life and you're like, I have to do me, or there's not going to be a me.
Mm.
And that is a scary moment. And for those who haven't been there, it is it's whatever your higher power is, that's when you're right there, is when you are ready to face with whatever that is. You have to face yourself. So when you started going through this is like 2020, right?
Yep, 2020.
What resources did you initially try to use?
Yeah, it was a buffet of resources. I honestly tried everything. I was a bit of a guinea pig, but my top ones, I guess, would be well, obviously counseling. So seeing a therapist was definitely up there. I'm not gonna say anything negative about medication, but medication does help you in a short term get through those. Like you said, a coping mechanism, right? So
Yep.
medication shouldn't be, don't touch it, it's bad for you. It has its purpose, it has its time, right?
Absolutely.
TRE was something I came across, which is tension trauma release exercises, which is a way to rebalance and reset your nervous system. That was 100% one of the key things that allowed me to kind of be where I am today. Massage, you would think massage is more like a spa thing and nice to have, but
It works though
a
so much.
regular massage, yeah, can really assist your body's rebalance the nervous system, vagus nerve, relaxation. There's so many benefits to it, and it's also a bit of talk therapy. Like I got some of my best conversations talking to my massage therapist about burnout and stress and balance and life and everything, right? So
And why not? It's a pretty intimate situation. I mean,
yeah.
their hands are on you. All bets are off at that point. You know what I mean? What better? Take advantage of it.
Yeah. Acupuncture, another great one for nervous system reset, which I think is kind of the key to a lot of people's stress injuries, right? Is nervous
Right.
system.
Yep.
So if you kind of ignore that and you don't actually get a chance to reset the nervous system, you're basically just putting a band-aid on it. You need to reset that nervous system, get your body back into homeostasis, kind of rebalance, or else you're not going to progress as quickly as you could, right? So
Right. Never
coaching.
tried that. Coaching. Yeah. That was
And
right
that would be my last one. Coaching would be my last one. I gained so much valuable information about myself, so much chances for introspection about who I am, why I'm here, what my values are, what's really important in my life. Yeah, if I didn't have coaching, I probably would not be nearly as healthy as I am today, for sure.
It's one of those things. It's like a gate to a different road, to a different path, and it's one of those things when I went through, and I talk about this. I've talked about it a few times on the podcast. When I got introduced to coaching and was beginning to be coached, I realized that I had never actually stepped back and asked, "What are my values? What do I care about?" I thought I just cared about the job. I thought I cared about being firefighter Keith, and there's a lot more than just the titles we carry. Whether you're a father, a husband, a friend, a son, a daughter, whatever it is, there are things within us that really define who we are beyond the job, beyond any title or position. And coaching for me, and it sounds like it did for you, it gave you that introspective look to be like, hey, these are things that matter to me. This is who makes me who I am. And it was through those powerful conversations, those amazing questions that I was being asked, that I started to see it. And that's, for me, that's when I knew I had to become a coach. I knew um, it was definitely a skill I would benefit from, and with everything I do. I mean, most of my life these days is spent talking to people and asking questions, and not being afraid to ask certain questions. And
Mm.
you know, I know you'll probably agree that coaching gives you that ability to really have profound conversations with people.
Yeah, and that's what brings me joy is with coaching is those conversations. Majority of the time, they're fairly positive because they're looking forward into the future,
Mm.
growing. And for me, having a positive interaction with people every single day is way better than having a whole bunch of negative
Right.
conversations, putting out fires and politically wise.
Yeah.
So I've kind of found my dream job, second on core of being able to support people in a positive way versus having that negative, sour kind of um, fight, essentially.
Yeah, being there on their even when you go back to the job, being there on their worst day.
Mhm.
Having
100%.
your best day necessarily be their worst day, and so being able to be there to give somebody that opportunity to have
Mhm.
good days is definitely a spin on it I like. And so with that, one of the things I want to make sure we talk about is your book. I have it right here, and we'll make sure the viewers at home have the info for it. So what got you to finally bite the bullet, if you will, and write this? Because as someone who is in the middle of editing his own book, is a process, and
It is a process.
you stand on the edge numerous times, and it's like, do I want to write this? So what got you to do it, man?
Yeah. Well, once again, back to coach. I hired a coach during my journey of recovery because I kind of wanted to say, like, I don't think I'm going back operationally. So what's next for me? I really didn't know. I was kind of like in a numb state. I was just not. I didn't know which direction to go. So in discussions with my coach, we were sitting on my deck having a nice conversation over a cup of coffee, and she essentially asked me, like, what is it that you want to do in life that you haven't done already? And I said, well, by far it's write a book. I'm a huge reader. I read tons of books. I have a lot of content. I want to write a book. And she said, okay, when's that going to happen? I said, well, probably, I don't know, probably 10, 20 years, something like that. And she
Hmm.
challenged me right there
Hmm.
and then. It's like, why are you waiting?
Why are you
So
waiting?
that day in September 2020, I started writing a journal, just dumping everything from my mind into that journal. No method to it, no organization, just spewing it out all on the pages. And it took me just over 2 years to get it published. So it just came out on October 31st of this year, 2022. And it was a tough battle for sure. The
Hmm.
writing was a piece of cake. I
Right.
love the writing. The editing was
Oh,
a
it's a
nightmare.
nightmare. It's a nightmare. Yeah.
And I came close. I was probably 90%. I came close to just saying the book provided its purpose. Its original purpose was therapy for me to be able to just flush out everything in my mind, all my past traumas, all my past incidents, why I think I was burnt out, all these different
Hmm.
things. And I was just going to be for me. And I was like 90% through. And I'm like, there's no hope. I just want to keep this to myself. I might as well just share this with the world.
Yeah,
If I sell one copy and help one person,
that's it. Yeah,
that was worth it. That was worth it.
yeah,
Uh, so for me, yeah, that was kind of the storyline there. And yeah, I think I don't know, 300-400 books in, something like that now
that's
sold.
great. That's great.
And it's been only a few months. So I think there's people out there that are experiencing some very similar stories to what I went through. So that's comforting on my end as well as their end, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's great for you to be able to put yourself out there too. I mean, that shows a lot of transparency, and also shows vulnerability. And I think that's the underlying message, right? Is it's okay. It's
Mm.
okay. We're human. This stuff's going to happen. And for you to be able to kind of put that in the book form and get it out there, man, props to you. That's as someone, like I said, as someone who's in the process of editing his own book, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of vulnerability and strong work on getting that done for sure.
I can't wait to read your book, Keith. But
It's
honestly,
coming.
honestly, being vulnerable and being totally like not holding any cards close to my chest, I feel so much better in life.
Oh yeah.
There's like a huge weight off your shoulders. Like,
Yep.
why mess around and be guarded your whole life? Just
Hmm.
say it how it is. And I think that's to me, it's lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. Huge weight. I got no problem telling any of my story to anybody. So
That's it. You owned it. You've healed to the point where you own it, and I think that's an important part of all this. And once you can own it, once you can heal, sky's the limit. And there is there doesn't have to be an end date to anything, to careers, to marriages, to relationships, to whatever it is. I mean, we can heal from this and be better. And you've done that and have led those words of wisdom in your book.
appreciate that.
So as we wrap up here, I always like to ask people if they had any advice for the next generation out there, first responders specifically, what would that be?
Oh, there's so many things, but if I could kind of capsulize it, I think it would be to consider your whole body as a unit. Don't just work on your muscles, your six pack, your big
Hmm.
arms. Uh, for anybody, but first responders particularly, like consider your nervous system, consider your brain health. From day one, being a recruit, consider that, have that on the forefront of your mind, right through to the day you retire and past, really. And be open, be comfortable to be vulnerable at times. I think that's another key. It's not an easy thing to say, or it's an easy thing to say. It's not an easy thing to do is be
Right.
vulnerable. But once you are vulnerable, it's a whole different life and perspective that you can live. So yeah, I think the biggest thing would be to consider yourself as a whole unit, not just muscles and brawn,
Hmm.
and work about your nervous system, your organ health. All these things lead to a much healthier, happier life, and you're gonna be a you know a wicked firefighter as well if you're running on optimal fuel, your body nutrition, hydration, all these different things. Just treat it as it's a machine and treat it as your number one priority in life.
Those are great words, man. Those are great words. It's collectively, I think most people generally say the same thing when it comes to this subject, but it's always good to
Yeah.
get everyone's own take on it. So if you could go back, I always ask, this is sort of the closing question I ask almost everyone, and I've been asked numerous times. If you can go back and do it all over again, knowing what you know now, would you?
Yep, 100%. I would probably do it a little bit different,
Mm,
but I wouldn't change anything because it's made me grow into the person I am today. I love the fire service. I love serving the community. I love firefighting. I love the people. I love what the fire service is and what it brings to the world. Pretty amazing organization globally to be a part of. Like that's a brotherhood, some sisterhood that will never die. That's always going to
right.
be there.
Yep.
But yeah, I definitely have learned some things about my own
Hmm.
self care that I probably would tweak if I could, but I wouldn't change it because it landed me where I am today.
Amen to that. Absolutely. Well, Arjuna, this has been great. Again, it's always weird when you talk to other first responders, especially I said this in one of my last ones. There's like an age bracket with us, and men at least. This I find to be between like 36 and around 52. A lot of us who are so open about this stuff and are willing to talk about it. And it's weird when you have these conversations with people. It's they're saying the same things that you're thinking most of the time. Like I've had most of the thoughts that you just said. I've had them, and I'm sure if we went back and forth, you'd probably say the same with me. And it's refreshing, and for me, it gives hope, and hope is one of the reasons why this podcast exists. For people to hopefully find some of that by hearing other people talk about it, and like you and me just talked about, being vulnerable, being transparent, because that is the way to live a healthy
100%.
lifestyle.
Mhm. Well, kudos to you for launching this podcast, because I think that's, once again, that's another area, another avenue to reduce that stigma across the world, right? Not just United States or Canada, it's across the world, right? So
Yep. That's the hope.
kudos to
That's the
you.
hope.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
Keep up the good work.
Always will. Always will. Folks, this has been an amazing episode with Arjuna George from British Columbia, Canada. Stay tuned for further episodes, and I hope you guys all stay safe through the new year, and we'll see you in 2023. Much love.